let's then get into your work, because wow, you are truly a pioneer who has just contributed so much to our knowledge about the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom and all of that. You have changed the paradigm scientifically as to what we can think about as far as really what are plants, and what is their capacity to communicate, and if they communicate, and having a respect, a reverence, a relationship, all your work. So can you give us in a nutshell how you would explain to someone what you do, and basically in a nutshell what you've discovered in your work to date?
So I started working with plants, and I've been working with plants now for just over 10 years. And I'm not a botanist or a plant physiologist. Those are the people who really know plants scientifically.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually, I was trained as a marine ecologist, and I worked with animals. And so my take on plants was from that perspective. I came in looking at plants as we do look at animals. And when you look at animals, as I did, and you look at behavior, you ask certain questions in terms of how do they communicate to each other? How do they learn from the experiences that they are having? And how do they share all of these learnings? And do they remember what happened yesterday? And so all of those questions in the animal realm are pretty common, and we have asked those questions for pretty much all species that we can look at.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved on to plants, I realized that those questions were not asked, and not only that, but it seemed like they couldn't be asked because there were kind of a bit of taboos. Why would you ever consider even asking? Of course, the answer, we already know the answer. The answer is no. And it's like, but that's not a very scientific approach, because it's like, well, have you even checked? If you haven't checked, then you simply don't know the answer. You don't know that the answer, it might be no, they can't do this or that, but unless you checked, you don't know it. So, and at the same time, this work came out from me, from my own personal experiences with plants themselves, and my own internal crisis with my own work as a scientist. And so I stopped working with fish, which was my animal collaborator, and started working with plants. And initially I was just looking at communication, because that was something that I was doing already with fish, and I was interested in seeing how plants communicate. And so, to my surprise, some people had already started working on these in terms of chemistry and light. And so we knew already at the time that, they release volatiles that can, signal to other plants what's happening. And because I was coming from the animal background, it was interesting to me that it's like, but in the animal world, and we of all species know this very well, like sound is pervasive, is everywhere. We use it all the time. We are listening, we are producing it. We even get it to the point that we make music with it, so. And I think nature in general is a bit obsessed with sound. So
from what I understand, it's the original creative element. At first there was sound.
Right.
It was sound
that's
first,
right.
Before
that's
light.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So it just felt like, so this entire system, this entire experience is obsessed with vibration and frequencies and acoustics, and we haven't looked at plants in this way. So I was starting to question whether, that was possible. And I did a couple of experiments, and what I found is like, not only, of course, it's possible, but plants are not only emitting their own sounds, which initially I recorded using very awkward and very cumbersome equipment in a basement, in a lab. It was laser technology, very difficult to move. Like, you can't move it, so you have to take the plants to it. And it's not ideal, but it made the point. It was useful to make the point, like, well, we are actually picking up sound coming from these plants, so they can do it.
Wow.
And not only that, but like, they of course are listening as well. So they're able to detect different frequencies and different sounds in their environment. And then not only that, but depending on those frequencies and what those sounds are actually referring to, what they are, they will respond in different ways. So then you see the chain of action is like, I'm producing sound, I'm listening to sound, I'm responding to the sounds in my environment. And potentially then I produce sounds, I listen to sound, and I'm responding. And
Wow.
so suddenly the system becomes very complex, and it's like, okay, and they're responding to sounds. In my work, I was showing how plants can detect the source of water based on just the sound of water underground. Even if in my experiment, there was no water, there was just a recording of the waters, but the plants knew what that was. So
wait, did you trick them? Did they think it was water, or did just because of the sound? You said there wasn't actually water.
Yeah.
So they were going only on sound.
To the water that wasn't there, but the sound of the water was there. Yeah. And then, other colleagues have demonstrated similar ways how plants can respond to the sound. So there is no other but the sound of an herbivore chewing on someone's leaves. The next door plant, just on the sound, so there is no herbivore around, but just on the sound, it will start responding as the herbivore is actually there. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and the same with bees. It's like there is this is more recent study from a group in Israel where they showed how the plants will increase the level of sugar in its flowers at the sound of the bees. And of course, when the bees is approaching, it's useful because you want to be very attractive. But this response happens even when the bees is not there, but the sound of the bee is provided. Wow. So the plants know exactly what those sounds are. And what that means as well is that these sounds have meaning. They represent something. And so then who is giving this meaning? Who is giving meaning to the experience that these beings are having? And of course, my work also extended on, because we are entering the cognitive realm, and often from a human-centric perspective, we think that cognition in the cognitive realm refers to things that have to do with the brain. But no, cognition is a big umbrella that contains many processes. And processes are not related to traits or property. You don't have to have a brain or a certain thing to be able to do X. If you're doing X in different ways, you're still doing X. So within the cognitive realm, you have all the processes for learning, for remembering, all of those. Many of the behaviors are under that umbrella. And so I started testing as well the ability of plants to learn from their experience and remember what they've learned. And so one of the famous studies is with the mimosa, where the mimosa remembers an experience and he learns to ignore it.
That's a type of plant, mimosa.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, this plant is actually called the sensitive plant, and because it moves and it closes the leaves at a speed that we, with our eyes, without any help from technology, can see.
Kind of like the praying mantis, like.
It folds. The other one, Drosera, the Venus flytrap. That's the one that you're referring to. Yeah. So these are few plants have these responses that we can see with our eyes. So they're very good because we can. It's kind of like gives us the feeling that they are closer to the animal world than many other plants, right? Because they're moving. Because we are obsessed with movement at a particular time scale. Plants move, but they move at a different time scale, so we can't see it and we can't perceive it until we come back a month later and say, oh, that plant went from there to there. I say, oh, so they do move. So so in my work I use, for example, with mimosa, we were able to demonstrate how these plants is able to basically decide whether the experience is worthwhile the effort of responding to or not. And because the experience that I put it through was scary at first, but there was no consequences. So it's almost like if I say like, boo, the first time I do it, I might scare you. But if I continue doing that, it won't, you'll be like, yeah, well,
You
whatever.
learn.
That's right.
Okay.
So these plants basically showed us that they can learn really quick, and then not only that, but they remember that experience, so that learning is remembered. And if you go back a month later and you try the same trick, the trick doesn't work because
So that shows an intelligence. That's an intelligence.
That's right.